Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, February 13th, 2023, and this is episode 698 of Living Free in Tennessee. And today we are live recording the third in a series of the My Three Things series. What's the My Three Things series, you ask? Well, if you don't know, we've done a couple of episodes on applying the idea of making a life strategic plan to further your goals, so that when you want to focus on something, you have an idea of what you should focus on. And then we break it down into big goals and then little goals, and then daily you have up to 3 things you can do each day. There are 3 do or die things though. So sometimes you'll have 2, sometimes you'll have 1 3 thing. Like somebody today posted about their 1 3 thing. And in this way, you take a small step every day towards building the life you want to live, rather than feeling like you're caught in the trap of somebody else is making your choices for you. And you may be in a situation right now where you're at a job where people make choices for you, or you're in a relationship where people make choices for you, or you have said yes to a whole bunch of things. So you're in a other people are making choices for me of your own making. And I think when you get in that situation, you start feeling helpless, frustrated, you act out, there's anger, and you feel hopeless, like you're not sure how to get out of it. This is how you get out of it. And you're not going to get out of it tomorrow if you do this today, but over time, you will find that you are more in control of your life, and that when maybe something is something that somebody else chose for you, you have made the decision to let them do that, right? Because, like I serve customers, and so then they schedule time with me, and, basically they've made the decision to schedule that time with me, but I have chosen to open that time up to be scheduled. And so it feels a little differently than when you just walk in Monday morning and discover all of a sudden that Friday night, instead of going bowling, you have to work late because they own you and they own your schedule. And a lot of people don't like that. I think it's funny if we could figure out a different way to do things like that for people, it would make a whole bunch of people feel less frustrated, but nobody really cares, right? Except for you. You care if you're frustrated. Nobody else cares if you're frustrated. So we're going to talk about that today. Of course, we're also going to do our usual live segments, Tales from the Prepper Pantry, Frugality Tip, the weekly shopping report, and Operation Independence. And then we'll hop into the SWOT. Before I do that, people on the live stream, if anybody contacts you who has my logo and asks you to go off in a secret chat room, that's not me. Not going to happen. 2, if you have questions along the way, put the first couple of words in all caps so that I can get to those and just tag them for the end of the show. For this show, I'm mostly just going to go straight through because I want to put this recording on the My Three Things page so people can go through the podcast in order. People who are tuning into this podcast for the first time and haven't done the first 2 steps, I think it's valuable to listen to this podcast, but I have also put links in the show notes for this podcast for the other 2 so that you can do them in order if you want to, or you can listen to this and go back and listen to those however you want to do it. Let's also talk about this week's live stream schedule. Tomorrow at 12:30, I'm doing my Tuesday live with John Willis, and we've got several people booked. So we're going to kind of do a round robin tomorrow. It should be fun. 12:30 Central will be on my YouTube channel. That's at LFTN, as well as the Special Operations Equipment YouTube channel. Wednesday, I will be live recording an interview with somebody. For those of you who are in our social networks, you interact with her. And that's Thesia Ellis, whose name she has been like making fun of me for years for messing up her name. So hopefully I got it that time. Thesia, I believe is how you say it, Thesia. And she'll be talking about some of her adventures. So we'll get that Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central at the Living Free in Tennessee YouTube channel. That's at LFTN on YouTube. If you hate YouTube and want to see it on Twitter or Odyssey, you can do that because I will simulcast that to those places as well. Thursday evening at 7 p.m., we have the Self-Reliance Festival live, and we've been highlighting speakers because early bird pricing is about to go up. So we're trying to get as many people to get their tickets in before the prices go up so they don't have to complain about paying a higher price. And then Friday, of course, at 9:30, we will have the Homestead Happenings live stream, and you can tune into that. Now, here's the deal. I still have tooth problems. Today at 4 p.m., I meet with an endodontist again. And then they're going to tell me if they're going to rip into my face. And then if they rip into my face on one of those days, the live stream will be canceled or pushed to another time or whatever. What I know from last time this happened, because they put me on some pain meds before doing it, is I can still function after it happens-ish, once my face is something I can feel again. And so if I have a later, if let's say it happened Wednesday and Thesia is up, I will find out from her if we can push it late enough that I can feel my face again, and then we have our conversation. So that's happening. Hopefully this is the last round of that. I apologize for this disrupting the schedule so much this year. It has been a very eye-opening experience about just scheduling in today's medical world and a whole bunch of other things that I'm sure I'm doing a show about. Has a lot to do with network and advocating for yourself. So we'll talk about that on a different show. I also want to thank today's show sponsor. And this is the show sponsor today, Agorist Tax Advice. Do you want to give Uncle Sam a few of your hard-earned dollars? Do you wonder if the time has come to set up your LLC or your S Corp? Are you not quite sure? Should I be a sole proprietor? Are you wanting to pass along wealth that you have built to your children, but not sure the best way to do that? Matthew Sursley of Agorist Tax Advice can help you make sense of all of these options, understand how to stay on top of tracking write-offs, and see new ways of organizing your finances so that you keep more of your hard-earned dollars in your pockets. Matthew has a broad knowledge of business finance, real estate, and end-of-life planning, which means that he can help you find legal tax loopholes and understand the risks. Just head on over to agoristtaxadvice.com/LFTN to arrange for a consultation. And one of the interesting things about Matthew, as I've gotten to know him, he doesn't quite have an eidentic, I don't know how to say that word, memory, but he's one of those people, when he reads something, he pretty much recalls it forever. And that's part of why he does this really well, because he will have read some obscure tax code 3 years ago. You'll bring up something, he'll be like, oh yeah, I read that and this is what it said. I need to verify what it is now because things change over time. Anyway, Agorist Tax Advice, well worth the investment if it is time for you to figure out how to optimize your tax situation. And I know it's tax season, so we're all thinking about, man, whatever other write-offs should I have tracked this year and how can I do next year better? I mean, I know I go through that at this time of year, now through about mid-March. Gosh, speaking of which, March is coming fast. Sip. Anyway, next up is our first segment of today's show, and that is Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. And I am redoing my shelving systems in my pantry over the next month or so, because I've had sort of a temporary solution in there for a while, because the intention has been to rip the roof off, redo the roof, and reseal some things in there, and then build custom-made shelves. And I decided that as much as I would love to do that in my pantry, it costs money, and I have prioritized the expending of money for such things on something else. So I am going to redo how I store in there. Part of the issue is, without the replaced roof, pieces of the ceiling are kind of getting old and crumbling down because it's a plaster ceiling. And then that falls on the tops of my jars and things in there. So I'm going to deploy a bin system in there so that it keeps it a little bit less dusty, etc. And also makes it so every so often, there's work done behind the prepper pantry. I think the walls shake a little bit and one of my bottles will jump off. So I want to secure against that, because it's not super fun to come in and find vinegar all over the floor or something. So that's happening. And I'll probably do some videos on that just to explain what I'm doing and why. Because one of the things about pantry management is everybody's pantry is different. It's different for a couple of reasons. One, you store something different than what I need to store. Also, your space is a different shape and size than my space. And I didn't have a pantry when I moved in here. I had some shelves in the laundry room. That is where part of the places I put my canned goods. And then above the wall, you can see on the video that's stoned, I have a single row that has a shelf on top of this rock wall. And between that and the ceiling, you can fit mason jars. So I put jars all along my ceiling. And I have gotten pretty creative with where I store things and then keeping track of that. But I did at one point rip all the utilities that were not being used, like the wood burning water heater and the boiler tank for the boiler system that no longer exists here, and some other stuff. It was all in this utility room. And you called that the prepper pantry. And that's where I put a lot of mostly paper goods and then some food that can handle temperature changes, because it's not extreme temperature change there, but it's not as stable as inside the house. So, my pantry is going to look different than yours. And I think it's important to realize that, because you build your pantry within the confines of what you have. And you may run into barriers that other people don't have. And then those yield really creative storage ideas. Like I know somebody who cut into their drywall and made recessed shelves for canned goods in their hallways. That's a lot of storage, man. That's a lot of storage. Anyway, I pulled out some venison from last year's venison that I did not butcher. Somebody else butchered it for me because I was out of town. So they cut it up and threw it in bags. And they didn't know about the silver skin thing. And if you don't know about the silver skin thing, is if you don't get the silver skin off certain parts of the venison, no matter what you do to that, the silver skin is like this chewy, awful thing that's not good. So I made chili this week. And I was just going to cube it up because I didn't realize the silver skin was still on it. Pulled it out of the bag and I'm like, well, I see silver skin. And it's a lot easier to shave that off when it's still attached to the bone. And it was not. So I was, kind of like, okay, do I just feed this to the dogs? What do I do? And finally I was like, okay, there's enough of this silver skin meat at this point in front of me defrosted that I'm just going to grab the meat grinder. So I ground it. And then what happens when you do that is it grinds it up and the pieces, like stuff gets kind of caught back in the grinder that doesn't want to go through. And that's the stuff you give to the dogs. And then I ended up with ground venison. So I made ground venison chili yesterday, which I have not tasted yet because at the last minute, a friend called and said, do you want to go out to eat? And I caved and went out to Indian food with her, which was really fun. But yeah, so we'll have venison chili tonight, of course, and that is what it is. I spotted the first dandelion bloom of the season about a week ago. Yeah, I had a flower in my yard. It was 27 degrees when I woke up this morning, but I had a blooming dandelion, the honey badger of interesting medicinal weeds in there. So that's part of the fun part. And I'm just keeping my eye out for the early spring things to harvest. I've already got dead nettle coming up. So we will be harvesting what we want to harvest. I want to get a bunch of dandelion flowers put up this year and dried for tea for the winter, because I've realized that I need to be a little more purposeful about the herbs I'm putting up for the winter. This year I was a little lackadaisical about it, and I ended up needing some that I didn't have. You know what I needed? Comfrey. Yes, I've been drinking comfrey tea. This is a sort of a controversial topic because there's a study out about comfrey causing liver damage if you consume it internally. And so I'm saying that so when you hear me tell my story, you don't just go copy me. You go do your own research and you look into that, decide where on your risk analysis you want to hit. But what I know is that also for hundreds of years, comfrey was used internally to help build bone, like address bone issues and some other things and digestive issues. And because of all the tooth stuff I decided that comfrey tea would be a good idea for me. So I'm going to do that for about 10 days through this little chapter. And then I was like, oh, great. I don't have dried comfrey leaves. But it turns out I did, because in a panic last moment, oh my gosh, it's the last freeze event, I sent mom a sauce out and I was like, I need comfrey leaves just in case I need a poultice this winter, which means like I would make a poultice out of the dry leaves if I sprained my ankle or something. And she ran out and she got like 7 leaves and we dried them. And I was like, I have 7 dried leaves, which is plenty for my purposes. So with that in mind, I was like, okay, man, like I could have tapped into some local people who I know would have them and then go, deal with that. But luckily I had those 7 leaves. So we're going to make it through 10 days and then I'll be good to go. My canned goods are holding out really well. We used the last of the corn that I canned in 2021, which was 2 seasons ago. And I didn't do any canning of corn this year because we don't eat a lot of corn. If we eat it, it's usually on the cob fresh. And that is what, how I make canning decisions sometimes. So I can my surplus, but if there's something coming on that's surplus that I already have a lot put up of and we're not eating a lot of it, I won't can it the next year. Now I'm completely out of corn. So next year I'll do another batch. I'll probably do 12 jars of corn and then see how long that lasts me. It lasts me a really long time. I might not get through all my tomatoes this year, which is a little shocking, but we'll see because it's time for me to cook chilies and other things and beef stew and stuff for the workshop that we have in April. What I do is I pre-cook that and freeze it, and then it gets reheated for the workshop. And usually we have a sweet potato chili. We have a beef chili that doesn't have vegetables in it, but it doesn't have beans in it, but it has tomatoes and peppers in it. And we often have something like a beef stew. I try to serve a soup with lunch every day, except for the first day we usually don't, just to have a little extra heartiness. And also as a hedge against if the weather's a little cooler, people like that hot soup. And if the weather's too warm for soup, we can just not reheat it that day and serve something a little colder. But I like to have soups with meals at the spring workshop, partially because I think when you're eating seasonally, you eat a lot of soups and stews. And so we're always tapping into what we've grown here or what we can get locally to provide food for the spring workshop. And so, that is what it is, right? I'm also about to pack my whole kitchen into boxes and not be able to cook in my kitchen for a week or 3. And I'll tell you more about why under Operation Independence on that one. Next up, we have the weekly shopping report from Joe. Joe says Dollar Tree was first. I'm beginning to see some thinning in the main food aisle, although there are more products in the drink aisle, and the drink coolers are a little better stocked than last week. The frozen food coolers in the back remain mostly empty. The store was pretty busy today. 2 cashiers open, both with lines. Next was Home Depot. A 2x4x8 remained $3.35. Do you guys remember when that was $11? Yeah. They were rather busy around the contractor entrance, but I did not look around the rest of the store as Sonia was waiting outside while I checked out. Our final stop was Aldi. We found what we wanted. And there was at least 2 cases of heavy cream. I noticed that flour had gone up. It's now $2.18 a package. Our careful buying habits caught up to us this week in a good way. We escaped the store for less than $50. Untainted regular is $3.99 a gallon. And Sonia commented on how she saw more people with fuller carts. So that's the shopping report. We've been doing those for a long time now. Joe puts that together just about every week. If you want to see it the minute it comes out, just join our group on MeWe. That's over at MeWe.com, Living Free in Tennessee. Next up, we have the Frugality tip. These come from y'all. And if you want to get one in, just email me, Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com, and put Frugality tip in the subject line. This one comes from Dylan from Steady Presence. Cheese squares. It's all about a keto-friendly snack that you can make yourself. What he does is he takes sliced cheese in squares and puts them in the oven. Guys, I'd put parchment paper under this if you did this, just in case. He bakes it at 350 for 10 minutes to make cheese crackers, which is a great keto snack and salad topper. So that's the Frugality tip of the week. Or you can go to Aldi and buy cheese crisps, and you'll probably spend more money on those crisps than just making them in your oven. You know what I do? I freeze dry cheese, and I make like cheese croutons as snacks. It's one of my road trip foods that I have that I just bring with me so that I don't cave and buy some crap at the gas station. Next segment is Operation Independence. This is where we talk about paying down debt and building local ongoing revenue into our lives. And the first thing is this, and it's all about the kitchen. I've been doing more webinars for my kitchen. I decided that, so my counters are pretty trashed. Like, they're not flat. It's Formica that water soaked through the Formica. That's how bad it is. And they're warped and crazy. And the original counters that I ordered weren't built very well, and they wouldn't accept a warranty claim when it started showing its long in the toothness in the first year of ordering them. And I have dealt with these counters for a long time. Source of frustration for Nicole sauce. That's okay. So I decided, I'm doing a lot of like studio work here, and it might be nice to have counters that don't look like Frankenstein, although whatever, like most people aren't judging me based on my counters. But it'd be nice to be like, hey, this is how you clean a counter, rather than this is never mind, just F it. Like, it's not helpful right here. Too much texture. Too much texture in the Formica. So I reached out to a friend about, I've been going around and around about this. So I was like, do I do tile? Do I put like stainless steel in? Do I do granite? Like, what am I going to do? And a couple of times I've sourced some used granite counters. I was thinking of just adjusting to my kitchen because I want to keep the cost down. And here's why. The floor in my kitchen is also not level, either because of settling or it was built that way to accommodate a floor duct that is not being used. And I don't know which of those two things it is. And the only way to find out which of those two things it is to pull the floor out and look. And then once the floor is pulled out, you know what that means, right? It means my 4-day bathroom project turns into a 2-month bathroom remodel. So I've been loath to do that. I did repair one floor joist when we pulled the wall out between my kitchen and my living room to make an open kitchen living room area. And that was just because the joist had warped and needed to be replaced. And so it got replaced. So I suspect it's actually because the high point is the ducts. I think it was that the house was built to be as low as possible by somebody who, when they put the ducts in, realized that they were going to, that it was a little higher to accommodate the ducts. And so they just sort of built it up and then chose their flooring based on that. But I could be very, very wrong, right? And so I haven't, as I said, I've been really hesitant to get into that. I am replacing the counters. I have finally decided to put in cedar countertops cut by a friend of ours who has a mill. And I think he's already cut the wood for that. And to also build a bar out in the middle. So it's like kitchen along one wall plus a bar. Move the sink to the bar and do that. But my interim step before doing that, because if I move the sink, I get into the floor. If I get into the floor, I get into the joist. You see how this all cascades, right? I decided I'd just build the bar on the non-level floor, do the counter, so the studio can look a little bit better. I can have a little personal sanity with my counters actually working, and then I'll deal with the long term later. And then I started thinking about, well, how much would it really cost to do the stupid floor, right? And I had somebody over to help me assess it, and it's going to increase the cost of the project, I think, by $1,500. And if I do it this way, I only disrupt my life once, and it's done all the way. And I finally just decided I'm going to do the long-term fix, which will be more disruptive and take longer, but have a result where my studio can be set up so it's easy to turn on and off with the cameras. And the whole thing is done all the way, and I'm not like spending another extra, it'd probably be an extra $1,000 or so to do it in the 2 phases I was originally planning to do it in. So it's actually like big picture, less money to do it all now. And so I deprioritized the Prepper Pantry roof and some other things to put the money into doing that. And I'm sharing that story because it can be really hard to decide what to do when you have a million things that need to be done. Sometimes you just have to make the decision for whatever. Like, part of why I'm making this decision is I make money when I do webinars. And if my webinars work well and flow easily, then that helps me make money. It also brings me joy to have a kitchen that doesn't look like a cluster. So there's an emotional component to this. And those two things combined, plus the long-term, what would it cost if I did it all at once versus phasing it out? Costs more to phase it out. I might as like, for the long-term health of my finances, it made more sense to spend more money now or not do the project. So I'm doing the project. So that's under Operation Independence as a money expenditure. And I'm explaining how I just made that decision, because you're going to hit decisions like that too. And sometimes, you know what you have to do? You have to do it in the two phases, because the reality is you literally don't have enough money to do the thing. And if you don't do phase one, something's going to die or whatever, right? So it is what it is. Why do I keep saying it is what it is? I should erase that from my vocabulary, I think. I think that's a bad one. And then book learning's my next one. So this year I am changing, I'm improving how I assess the financial health of my businesses, and I am improving how I focus my time, and I am building a bigger network for all of us, and lots of big things, right? It's my breakthrough year. It's my breakthrough. I've learned a lot about breakthrough. One, work ahead, so that when stuff goes wrong, like you have to get all of the root canals at once, you have worked ahead and you're not like, oh, and I'm too stupid to do the work right now because they put all this medication in my system. 2, prioritize. 3, no excuses. That's how far we are on breakthrough right now. And I realized there are areas where I'm really good at marketing, and there are areas where I could definitely improve. And that's one part time management, and that is one part appropriately putting my time, which is time management, on the priority for the marketing, which brings in the leads, which then we can convert to supporters of the show and all of the other things that we do here, right? So I decided to start diving into to sharpen my own sword. I'll probably go to a few conferences this year too, and start adding back educational books to my life, because a lot of what I learn is hands-on practical things by doing it. And I haven't spent as much time on the academic side. I'm jumping back into the academic side on marketing, and I'm trusting people who are better at it than I am to recommend books for me. So I am reading .com Secrets right now, and it is already making a change in how I perceive some of the efforts I make. So just throwing that out there. I will share book names with y'all as I do them, in case you want to also check those books out. So far, .com Secrets is pretty cool. What I like about it is the guy who wrote the book, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head right now, he starts out saying it's called .com Secrets, but really this is just how you should do marketing. And it doesn't matter if you do it online or in person or in the mail or in the classified ads in the newspaper. If you do marketing in a disciplined way with a results-oriented approach, you will get results, or you will learn that your approach is faulty for the results you want, and you will change your approach. So I like how he did it. So it's not like, try my secret thing that lasts, approach with Google ads that lasts like 6 months and then you're screwed. And it was already 6 months ago that it changed before the book even got out the door, right? So I'm liking the book a lot, and I wanted to share that with you all. With that, it's time for the main topic of today's show, and that is choose your focus with my 3 things. So let's review what we've done here. First, when we started developing a life strategic plan, we started by developing a vision statement. And if you're interested in checking that out, that was the episode from the 2nd of January. It's called Establish Your Vision with My 3 Things. And it is in link if you want to check that out. But if you just type hashtag my 3 things, it will come up. Start with vision if you're going to go through this series. Start with the most recent vision from January 2nd, 2023. When it kicks off, I may say 22 at the beginning. I don't know, because the first 2 weeks of January, I don't know what year it is. So I just randomly spout off years, 22, 23, whatever. One time I'll just throw out a 2043 or something next year. Maybe I'll do that on purpose. But this whole thing started with me being miserable at a job in my 20s, and I decided to define how I wanted my life to be in terms of characteristics rather than what I was doing. And I sat down and I did that. And on that list, guys, oh, my back hurts. I was really into traveling. And so I wanted travel to be part of it, because I think if you find a way to define your work, whatever that is, working for yourself, working for somebody else, in terms of what you love to do, work is no longer work. and now it's part of your life, right? So that's what I was doing. I was like, these are the characteristics I want, and travel was on that list. And within 5 years, I had it all. I had that whole thing. I was traveling all the time for work. It was great, right? No. You know what it was? It was great for a while until I met somebody who I wanted to spend time with, who then I was always away from because I was traveling. Yeah. So I kind of went back to the drawing board and updated the characteristics, but I did it within the context of creating a life strategic plan. Now, by the time I got around to doing that, I had helped corporations make strategic plans for the corporation and for product lines. So I had been walking all my customers through this process, and I was like, wait, what if I apply it to my life? Now, I wish I was the first person in all of humanity who had this breakthrough. But if you look at most of the life coaching plans, what you're going to see them doing is talking to you through some version of defining your purpose and your vision and some goals to develop a life strategic plan. And they may call it all sorts of different things. I call it my 3 things because that's what emerged from me, because I have to trick myself into being productive. It is what it is. I said that again, guys. Like, I need to bonk myself on the head every time I do that. I need the clicker bell. And so I did that, and that has led me to have a podcast, a thriving coffee business, and to do these really cool events like Self-Reliance Festival, right? That's where it's been. And when I went into it, I didn't know that's what I was going to end up with. And I certainly don't know within 10 years what pieces of that will really change. I think we're locked in on the podcast unless something dramatic changes in our technological world, or unless y'all stop listening to me, and then I won't have a podcast anymore. But I think it'll keep going because I love doing it, and I'm a verbalizer. So there you go. So as that happened, the other thing that happened is I ended up with a lot of competing priorities, which became overwhelming, and I felt like I was drowning. And so the My 3 Things entered into it. So I had the life strategic plan, which worked into my vision, purpose, and areas of focus. That's the 3 areas of organization for it. I had a marketing position for me. That's right. I have a marketing position for me. I did. See, I caught it that time. And I had specific 12 to 18 month goals in the 3 areas of focus to build. And every year I update those areas of, not the areas of focus, but the goals under the areas of focus. And if I'm ever done with an area of focus, I have to add a new area of focus. In fact, I've had to switch out areas of focus because I knocked one out of the park in like a year. And then I was like, okay, so my debt is not all paid off, but it's dang close. And debt payoff was one of my huge areas of focus. And it went away because the system is set up and it's working, and I no longer need to build it. It's going to be done soon. So that plan is how I have become an overnight 5-year success, as I talked about on Jack Spirko's show. So I'm not the person who decided I wanted to be, let's say, a knife maker and launched my business and instantly had a decent revenue source and was growing. It took work, and it took discipline, and it took focus for 5 years. Now, I've up until before those 5 years, I've been building skills that have put me here, right? But I didn't really get them focused the way they needed to be until I wrote that life strategic plan. So we started with episode 1, which was define your vision. And during that episode, I explained that once you define your vision and have run it through all the iterative things that I ask you to do in episode 1, you still may end up changing your vision a bit after you write your purpose. And so then episode 2 of this process, which was done on the 30th of January, was define your purpose, which is a little less work than the vision. And over the years with our corporate clients, I have started with purpose and then done vision, started with vision and then done purpose. And what I have found is they usually take a lot more time if we start with purpose, then go to vision, than if we go vision, then purpose, and then compare the two and make sure the vision still stands. Because that is, in essence, high-level overview of what we do there. So then the third thing is you've taken these and you have updated and adjusted both to make sure they really work for you and your family. If you have a family, you should involve them in this process. So for you and your family. And also I run it by smart people who are mentors to me when I do this, just to get their external feedback. And I either do something with it or I don't. I also adjust the language based on what people say back to me. I say, this is my vision. They say, oh, that's your vision. They use other words that make a lot more sense than my words because they have processed it. And they're like, this is what I think that means in my language. And usually that is like plain English language instead of like hoity-toity Nicole words. So that's part of my process. So with that, we go into the third step of developing your life strategic plan. And this is finding your top 3 priority areas of focus. And the way I do this is with a SWOT analysis. That's SWOT. And that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is where you analyze internally and externally factors around you that influence your ability to move forward with your vision and your purpose. And this is where the rubber meets the road. So I start with the internal. Strengths and weaknesses are internal to you, to your family. And if this is related to your home or homestead, to your homestead. If it's your business, right? It just depends on what you're writing this for. But we're writing this for us. So I include home in that. And if your home is a 1-bedroom apartment in Philadelphia, then that is your home and that is your homestead. And if you want to make your 1-bedroom apartment in Philadelphia work for you, you can. You can, as part of your plan. You just have to decide to have a homestead mindset there. So homesteading isn't necessarily land, guys. It isn't necessarily land. So you start with your strengths and you ask yourself questions like, what am I good at? If everybody in the family does this separately. What am I good at? You list things like, what are my strengths? What am I best at? What do I achieve well? And it can be like physically, what are you good at? Intellectually, what are you good at? It can be, I just happen to have a secret superpower. Like if you have a superpower, I have a superpower. I have 2 superpowers. One is networking. I'm really good at connecting people. And the other thing I do well is facilitate groups. I don't know why. I'm naturally good at those things. I am naturally good at those things. I am not a naturally good singer, but I'm a naturally hard worker. And so I have developed the ability to sing well, for those of you who have heard me sing. When I started learning how to sing, I did not sound good. I had an ear for music. I have great musical recollection, but I had to build the voice to go with that. And people who come with natural voices sing way better than me. But a lot of them don't do well because they don't have the hard work part, right? So that's how this all plays out. So just spend some time and list 10 or 20 things, like a lot of things, not just 3 things. List a lot of things. So one time you'll hear me say, don't just list 3 things, like list a lot of things. And really hone in on what you're good in, what your secret sauce is or your superpowers are. What do you have of value in your household? I have 3.2 acres of land that can be made productive in one way or another. I have a skill in growing plants and husbanding animals. I have a south-facing slope that grows peppers really well. I have a beautiful location that would make a great Airbnb, right? Camping is awesome here. There's hiking. I have a lot of things. I have wild edible plants growing all over the place, right? All over the place that I can show people. You have assets in your house, even if it is currently on the liability side and costing you more than it brings in. There are assets there. Just figure out what they are. And then if your mom were to call you today, and for those of you who have difficult relationships with your mom, just substitute mom with somebody who really loves you and tell you what she thinks you're best at. What would that be? What would she say are your talents? What would she say are the assets in your house? Write those down. So you end up with a big list, okay? And you just move on. What are your weaknesses? This is where you get to go exist in all the negative spaces around you. What are you bad at? I include what do you hate here. I hate clerical work. It's probably my number one biggest hate in the entire universe. And I'm bad at it because I hate it. And the reason I'm bad at it is I do not apply discipline to do it. I also am number dyslexic, so I reverse numbers. Important to know that. That's a weakness for me, right? That is one of my weaknesses is I'm numbers dyslexic. Now, have I been able to turn it into a strength? Yes. And I can tell you how later. But that is important to be honest about. And what else are you bad at? You may bad at speaking foreign languages? I'm pretty good at that. Are you bad at raising plants? Are you bad at staying disciplined? Are you bad at getting up early every morning and exercising? Are you just a terrible cook? I don't know what your things are that you're bad at, but you're bad at something. And you're bad at multiple things. Or you have weaknesses. Perhaps you're not as strong as you wish you were. Perhaps you are grossly overweight and need to lose weight. And that is a physical parameter that gets in your way when you're trying to build things or climb ladders, right? Or, I don't know, squeeze under crawl spaces. There's crawl spaces I don't fit in because of the size of my body, guys, right? So that's all something you need to be honest about. Where are you vulnerable if things go wrong, like a job loss? Do you have enough money put up? Really? Or are your savings a weakness? Yeah, look at your finances. Look at your house. And what other limitations might you have? Maybe you have a bum knee that needs to be replaced and you haven't gotten it replaced, and that keeps you from being able to be super physically active. And so you need to include that in your reality when you make areas of focus. So once you've done that, move on to the external evaluation. This is where you get to dream big, man. This is where you get to think about opportunities. What opportunities are out there in the big, bad world? Except for I think it's a big, cool world, but that's just me. What trends do you see out in the big, wide world that can create opportunities? I see some trends right now that were not there 5 years ago, where people have started to wake up to how vulnerable they are to the supply chain issues and the just-in-time method of retail fulfillment that we have. And they're suddenly really interested in learning how to do more things for themselves. And one of my strengths is I know how to do a lot of things for myself because I've been living on a homestead for a while. I can put those two things together, can't I? There's a lot of trends that seem negative in our world that are creating lots of opportunities. What of these could external factors could provide opportunities for you and your family? That's all you need to do there. You start listing things. Threats. What trends in the big, wide world do you see that are threats to the success of you and your family? One that I have on my list right now is possible economic cliff. Real estate crash. Monetary transition to a CBDC. Some of those things are threats, right? War. Not just war in Ukraine, but just war anywhere. The leaders appear to be interested in going to war right now with whomever they can find to go to war. And war hurts societies very much. It hurts in the pocketbook. It hurts in the population. It hurts in the psyche. It hurts in a lot of ways. And no matter how many times they tell you that the reason we got out of the Great Depression was World War II, they're wrong. What we did in World War II was send a whole bunch of our value overseas and blow it up. You're never getting that back. You're never getting that back. What would have happened if we would have done the Great Depression, very differently? Nobody knows, because we didn't. Because that's not what we do. We try to fix things in ways that are stupid and don't work and make it worse. But that's because we want to do something and not do nothing. You have to figure out how to explain that nothing is something. Getting out of the way is something. Anyway, so what trends do you see in the big wide world that are threats? What external factors limit your opportunities, whatever they are? It could be something very local to you. The external factor is that you live in a town that does not allow you to grow plants or raise chickens, and that's part of your plan. And so that's a problem. It's an external factor, right? You need to just list out all the threats. And then once that's done, if you're doing this alone, I like to put them either up on my computer in a grid. So boop, boop, grid, strength and weakness on top. And then the next column, opportunities and threats. So strengths and opportunities are on the left, and weaknesses and threats are on the right. And I just list them all out. I usually do this on a dry erase board though, guys, or I do it on big Post-it things. I will type them up sometimes on a piece of paper if I need to do a digital engagement in that regard. But what's going to happen is I'm going to write all over it if I'm doing it on the wall or on my window. My window's a dry erase board for me. I just get pens that will draw on windows. In fact, dry erase pens do draw on windows. You just have to choose your color carefully. So when I was writing the Holler strategic plan, if you came up to my house, what you saw was writing all over the windows, and I looked like a crazy person. But that was just me using it as a dry erase board, and then eventually I cleaned it off, and now I have a big dry erase board I can use as a dry erase board, so I don't even need to write all over the windows. And Tori's saying Canva has a SWOT template. Yeah, you can already do that in Canva. All sorts of people. I mean, SWOT is nothing crazy. You can read about SWOTs. You can do a deep dive in SWOTs. And, you know, there's lots of arguing about some things, SWOTs, that I'm not going to go into. I'm telling you how I used it. And then hopefully you can use it that way too. So you write them all up. And then I put them through a few filters. And this is where I walk off the script of SWOT, but I'm kind of still on the script of SWOT. I clump and bump. I clump things together that are like things, and I put circles around them. And if they're across columns, this is why we have it out on the grid, I'll circle them across columns, things that are related. Or sometimes I've said the same thing 3 times with different words. Or if you have combined, because if you're doing this as a family, you're doing this grid on the board with everybody's stuff up there. And so if there's like 4 of you, you've got 4 people's worth of stuff up there, there is going to be overlap. And so you put things together that are like things. Sometimes you write them in a different way as a result of that. So you really process this. And then you start finding connections. Well, that weakness and that threat are not a good combination to have. And so I need to think about taking action to address my weakness so that if that threat turns into a reality, I can get through that threat. Or, yeah, Tori says, break out the highlighters. Yeah, exactly. Multiple colors of dry erase markers, guys. Trust me, you write it all in black, and then you have like red, green, and purple, and you do stuff with it. That's what I do anyway. I am like a color marker Nazi on a dry erase board. If you've ever seen me facilitate, it's like, this color is bad and this color is good, and we benchmark with these 2 colors. Yep, that's me. That's me. That's what I do. So find connections. So clump them up. Some things are just like so stupid that you put it on the list that it's never going to make the priority. You know that already. You just cross that out or erase it or whatever. And then you find the connections. And sometimes the connections are in the same, like opportunity, there's a connection. But usually it'll be like this opportunity and that threat work together. So if you have a threat of economic crash because of transitioning to a CBDC, and you have a strength, let's say a strength, it's not an opportunity, it's a strength in cryptocurrency knowledge, which can help address that threat. The opportunity is to develop knowledge in a network of people to opt out of the CBDC by having an alternative monetary system they can tap into and knowledge of, right? That's what John Bush did. That's 3 things that connected for him, I'm sure. And he has a strength in that he's a good teacher. So that's how you start looking for connections in the SWOT. And then what I do is I identify up to 3 things. The number 3 finally came, didn't it? Up to 3 things in each category. If I'm doing this as a group, I give people like 3 Post-it dots per category, and they can go put up to 3 per category on the things they think are most important to connect or to pull out or to work on or to work towards. And sometimes people will put all 3 of their votes on one thing in one category. It's totally allowed. When you're doing this as a group, what'll happen is you'll sit back after everybody's sort of circled or identified their priority items, and you'll realize there's something with 1 check mark on it or whatever, and that's pretty much gone. I'll let the person make the case for why people should change their mind at that point if we're discussing in a group, but it's pretty much gone at that point. And then you'll have a few things that are obviously floating to the top. And usually we end up with 5 to 8 things that have floated to the top. And then we pull everything else away and we look at those 5 to 8 things in their grid category of the SWOT. And we say, are they connected? Like, can we make that trifecta like I just did with the CBDC with John Bush, right? So, or is there something that hits all 4? It doesn't have to, but you may find that these things relate to each other. And once you do that, you choose up to 3 areas of focus from making those connections and finding the trends that you want to work on to meet your vision and your purpose. So along the way, what you do is you look back at your vision and purpose and you're like, this has nothing to do with that, and I'm not sure why it's here. Or this really will help us get there. So I really think we need to focus on that. So there's a lot, when you're doing this in a group, there's a lot of talking and discussing. The key is not to go into you're stupid mode or I'm right mode. Explain your position and then really listen, like talk with your ears, listen to what people have to say. And if when you hear somebody say something, you instantly are like, no, turn your no off for a second and consider what they're saying. And is your no coming from a place of you've already decided something without considering all of the aspects? Or is your no really a no? Like give yourself, like count to 5 or 10 and like think about why you have the no reaction before you start talking about the no. This is one of the few times I'm like, hold that no for a second, right? So that's how you come to find your 3 areas of focus. And at that point, you're gonna frame it in the terms of what we would call a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. This is not SMART goals, guys. Somebody's like, don't bring up SMART goals. I'm gonna bring up SMART goals today. We're not talking about those right now. So I want out of this SWOT, and this is where I'm totally off script from SWOT land at this point, I want big, long-term goals that get to your purpose and your vision. Big ones. So the thing about a BHAG is it's huge, and there's this piece of you that's like, I am not sure that I feel comfortable stating that as my goal because it's so big. I haven't quite figured out if I can get there or not. But you don't want it so big that you legitimately can't get there. So there's this like fine line, I think, on a BHAG. Again, my opinion, some other facilitator somewhere thinks I'm totally wrong and I don't care. Because I'm from Generation X, so I'm the generation that doesn't care. So the way I like to frame those is something that it can have a time constraint, but I want a time constraint of 5 to 10 years and not next week. If I'm going to put time in there, or it's sort of an ongoing, this needs to be accomplished. So there has to be some clarity of it's achievable and accomplishable, but it could be ongoing too. So one of mine is to create enough local ongoing revenue that we are able to support the vision of the Holler Homestead. which is that whole, when I started this series, I started talking about the Holler Neighbors / LFTN plan that we made. Well, if we want to be successful, there has to be revenue in whatever form. It can be cryptocurrency, it can be barter, but in some way, we need enough revenue that we thrive. And my opinion is it needs to come from our network. It needs to be local. I don't mean geographically local with local. I just mean it's not dependent on government grants or something like that. So create enough local ongoing revenue that we are able to support the vision of the Holler Homestead. And I mean that in perpetuity. So if somebody dropped me $5 million tomorrow, I probably could use that $5 million to have enough local ongoing revenue just from investing it that we reached our vision. Maybe. I'm not going to commit to that, but I'm pretty sure that there is some number, I don't know what that number is, that would set us up well enough that that would work. So, if somebody wins the lottery and the Holler and decides to apply it to the Holler, great. Lottery is not in my most likely areas to focus, though, but that area of focus works. So once you get 3 areas of focus, that's where you then break into what we call the SMART goals. Now, I'm not going to go there quite yet. Getting the 3 goals can be a bit of an argument because you're pulling it out of the SWOT, and sometimes there are 4 goals. And if you end up with 4 or 5 BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, write them down. It's okay to write them all down and then figure out what the first 3 are you need to work towards. And one of my BHAGs was pay off debt, which doesn't seem like a BHAG to y'all probably right now. That seems kind of mundane. But at the scale of debt that Nicole Sauce had built for herself and the way she was approaching her cash flow when this happened, the whole reason Operation Independence exists as an item in my Monday podcast is I had to hit it from a couple of sides. One, I had to stop the habit of paying somebody to fix things when I could fix it for a whole lot less without a whole bunch of time. And I had to have a strategy to pay off debt. And we gamified that at my house. We put it into a game. Like who could we gamified the not spending of money or the creating of value from the homestead. Those were the 2 sides that we were hitting. And then all of that extra value went towards debt. So I had pay off debt as one of my BHAGs because I didn't see how I was going to do it in my lifetime when I originally assessed how much debt I was in at my current income level based on my expenditures. That was the reality that I faced in, I think it was 2015. Don't quote me on the year. I don't remember exactly which year I started. I just know that it sucked. And I was already trying to pay that debt off before I created my life strategic plan. And then it became one of my BHAGs and at the expense of some other BHAGs. So I did end up with extra big, hairy, audacious goals or areas. I like to call them areas of focus because BHAG is such a term for me. It's like BHAG. It makes me think of these meetings I used to get stuck in at this one company where they wrote strategic plans but never actually pursued them. And then I spent a lot of time doing that. So yeah, I think they finally sold the company, made a profit though. So there's that. Must have gotten them somewhere. This didn't get me anywhere as working for them. So if you have 5 BHAGs, choose 3, work on those 3, and realize once you have achieved one, like paying off debt, it can go out the window and you can add a different BHAG in there, which did happen for me. I achieved it a lot faster than I thought I would. Just because it was there, reminding me that it was there. And then under each BHAG annually, set some SMART goals. And SMART goals are kind of a buzzwordy thing right now. So I'm sorry about that, but they do make sense. They're specific. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time constrained. So you're writing a goal that has a deadline that you create. It has something you can measure to see if you're successful or not. And it's got a specific purpose that is then supporting your BHAG. And your BHAG should also be, supporting something that is clear, like creating enough local ongoing revenue to support the vision of the Holler Homestead. So in order to do this, I think about like one of the ways that and I'm just walking you through an example so you have something you can link it to. So I want something specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time constrained for the next 12 to 18 months. So I'm actually willing to pass the year mark on these, even to 2 years, but I'm gonna do some heavy thinking on these at least once a year. This is part of why I take a week off every December. And one of the ways that has become obvious it's important that it support the Holler Homestead is the Living Free in Tennessee podcast monetization plan. A lot of you reach out to me and say, how do I monetize my podcast? And I'm like, don't worry about that. Worry about making your podcast something that's valuable to people. Worry about the people. Worry about the consistency. Get that part done and learn from it and learn how it becomes monetized from there. That may not be the best approach, but usually that's the way you approach it, because unless you have a lot of money to put into marketing and outreach and some other things to launch your podcast, what you have right now is your time. And where your time needs to be spent is making your podcast good and have followers and figure out how to interact with your network, because your network is king. So an example of a SMART goal that would support the BHAG of create enough local ongoing revenue to support the vision of the Holler Homestead is for me to book 6 paid speaking engagements in 2023 that are in networks that are outside the standard LFTN network, resulting in 150 leads per event entering into my sales funnel for the podcast. Now, here's how you get into the sales funnel for a podcast. You start listening to the podcast, you like it, you keep listening, and eventually you're going to sign up for something, right? A lot of you have done this. I'm sharing this transparently because I want you all to know what my thinking is behind the podcast. Yes, I am wanting to monetize it because I spent a lot of time in it, and that's fine. And some of you will listen to my podcast for free forever, and that's fine too. I hope it brings you value. That's my first and foremost hope. But I am also trying to monetize it. And so there is a sales funnel. So let's look at that. Is it specific? Yes, I want to increase the number of people who enter the funnel, the LFTN funnel. And I want it to be measurable. That's 900 people. I looked at that number and I was like, that's not that many people. Really. I should be adding probably thousands of people to it. But this is in one way. So this is not in the only way, but this is in one way. Is it achievable? Yes. I have more people asking me to speak than I can say yes to. So getting 6 of these shouldn't be a problem. The only thing is because going outside of my standard networks is a little different. I have to actually go hunting for some of that. So, people in our networks, they want me to speak all day long. They recommend me to people slightly outside of our networks and I go there. But if I want to get out, I have to make myself known to those networks. There's a lot of ways I can do that. I can reach out to people. I can ask for recommendations. I can go on other people's podcasts. I can write articles. There's all sorts of ways to do that. This is not the how I'm going to do this is not really written in the goal. This is just more the what I'm going to do. But it is achievable. Is it relevant? Well, I think when more people join our network, their lives improve. And because of that, they are able to participate in some of the things that we sell at Living Free in Tennessee that will help them address issues they need to get over, like buying tickets to Self-Reliance Festival or buying my My 3 Things book when it comes out. There's things you can do, becoming a member, all of these things, getting coffee at Holler Roast. I know that makes your life better if you love good coffee. Anyway, so the more people that join our network, the more find out about the other things they can do. And then revenue improves for me when that happens. And is it time constrained? I want to do this in 2023. I have already booked 3. I have 3 more to book before the end of the year. I actually just wrote this goal today while I was writing my podcast notes because I realized that I hadn't addressed this part of my plan for the year. So just know that sometimes we add things after the fact because we're like, wait a minute, I should be doing this and I should put a number to it. So that's a SMART goal. Book 6 paid speaking engagements in 2023 in networks that are new to LFTN. So that means TSP does not count, resulting in 150 leads, each entering our sales funnel for the podcast. It also does not include the SOE network. That doesn't mean I walk away from those networks. I am active in those networks. I love being in those networks. I am not leaving those networks because here's the other thing. Part of why that's 6 engagements, I'm going to find some new networks that make sense to interact with along the way that I want to be part of, that I'd love to cross-pollinate with y'all and bring some of those people into here. And then once that happens, I'm committed to those networks. I don't just go there for the money. That's not how I like to live. That's not part of my life strategic plan. That's not part of what motivates me. I acknowledge that money is part of my plan, but the relationships are more important. And connecting people so we can all be more secure together is more important. So, that's why that isn't like 20. 20 and then walk away from the ones I don't care. Like, and you'll see this when people come into our network with the sole goal of getting listeners for their podcasts, and they're in it for like 6 weeks and then they're gone again because they think they've gotten everything they can from LFTN. Those aren't the people who those aren't our people, right? It happens from time to time, but we have, like Ken Esch has been in our network for a long time. He has a podcast that's quite good. He's gotten very good at that. You should go listen to it. It's the not Forging Liberty. Oh, I just forgot the name. I'm sorry, Ken. Anyway, go listen to his podcast, and somebody in the notes like type it because I'm having a brain fart right now. Constructive Liberty podcast. Sorry, Ken. Wow, that just like flew out of my head. Anyway, the Constructive Liberty podcast, it's a really cool podcast. Go check it out. He has been in our network for years. He's been active in our network for years. He has helped people. He has guided people. He has asked for help from people, right? So that's an example of somebody whose network is overlapping with our network, who is an active member of a network, as we should be. That is the standard we want to set here. And so when I go out into new networks, same thing. I don't want to just I may go try hanging out with a network and then decide it's not the right fit and then disappear. But when I was there, I wasn't trying to just, get as many people from there to my network and then tell them to saw it off. That's not how I work. Anyway, so the other thing that would be a SMART goal under this that makes sense in partnership with the one I gave you is create a sales funnel by February 26, 2023 that guides participants through the process of developing a life strategic plan and nets $5 per lead generated for the LFTN podcast. Now, some of you might know that on February 26th, we are doing a My 3 Things webinar that is free. That is a funnel, right? That is a sales funnel. And there will be opportunities to upgrade to other things if you like that thing. I will not be just buy during that. I actually will be walking you through the process of developing your life strategic plan. If you haven't signed up, by the way, livingfreeintennessee.com, February 26th. If you can't be there on the day of, it is recorded, so you can go back and just do it whenever you have time to do it. Definitely, if you're interested in this process, sign up for that because I haven't finished writing it, but you will have a guide that you fill out and some other stuff we're walking through on the webinar. It is scheduled for an hour. It will probably go 2 hours, and I will say that in the confirmation email that comes closer to the event. Anyway, that's another example of a SMART goal, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time constrained. So you take your areas of focus, you make your goals underneath those, and you have things that you can legitimately do in 12 to 18 months, which means under my BHAG, I usually have 3 SMART goals, unless I think I really can achieve more, but I constrain it to 3, and here's why. If I knock it out of the park by June, I got them all done. You know what? I can go back and add more because there's more work to do. But if I overcommit on the actual goals I'm working on, I build myself a problem And it becomes this problem where you're running after doing everything instead of doing a few things well, and you end up overwhelmed, and you end up not doing anything well. And the whole purpose of my 3 things is to filter down and to serve as a filter for when an opportunity comes up, do I say yes or no, and why? So once you have all of that, you take your vision and your purpose, which I told you to put on a piece of paper or type up or whatever you're going to do last time. You put your BHAGs, and under each BHAG, you have your 3 SMART goals per one. I'll let you get away with 4. I'm just saying, I will let you get away with 4 there, 4 SMART goals under each BHAG, but not more than 3 BHAGs. And all of that should fit on one piece of paper, right? One piece of paper printed. And the reason for that is I want you to print that piece of paper and carry it around with you. And if you're somebody who really does absorb information on the phone, fine, make it so you can look at it easily on your phone. Paste it into your journal, whatever it is. I'll have it in more than one place to remind yourself what your big picture priorities are, and then commit to just like look that over once a week. A good time to look that over for me is Selfish Sunday. It's like coffee, look that over. Am I still really doing that? You don't need to dive deep there. Am I still really doing that? Really, Nicole? Or did I just spend the last week like worried about my stupid teeth instead of doing that? Right? And every time you find yourself spinning or swimming or out of control or overwhelmed, you look back at that and you're like, okay, there's all this over here noise. What about that noise relates to this? Okay, I can do one thing out of that noise. I will do this. And this is how we go from overwhelmed to the My 3 Things. And this is where My 3 Things comes in. At night, I think about how did my day go? You guys have seen some of those update videos on YouTube. If you follow me on YouTube, just sort of a debrief. Don't always do it on video. I usually just do it in my head or in my journal. Day went well. This didn't go well. Tomorrow, I think it's really important to X, XYZ. And then it's always important to XYZ, by the way. And as a result, the 3 things I need to do tomorrow that are most important are these 3. Or I list a list of 25 things that need to be done tomorrow, and I take a highlighter and I circle the 3 things. And then I write my 3 things, and I write those 3 things, and then I have the rest of my tasks below it that may or may not get all the way done that day, but those 3 things will get done because they're the 3 do or die things. Sometimes I'm like, man, I haven't been eating right. That was me at the end of December. Man, I've been eating a lot of Christmas treats. I need to get back on my ketovore diet sort of practices and not eat a bunch of processed foods. So eat on plan has been one of my 3 things it was in January until it was a habit again. Now it's off the list, and my 3 things usually revolves around making sure this podcast gets out, something on the homestead, and something Self-Reliance Festival related, right? That is the way mine are coming. And then a lot of people you'll see on our networks will say what their my 3 things are, along with a picture of their coffee mug. This is my coffee mug made by Rachel. She makes pottery. She makes some really beautiful pottery, and she built my logo onto this mug, and I love this mug. And then she sent it to me, so thank you for that. They'll do their morning mugshot. They'll share their my 3 things publicly. And when you share things publicly, there's an accountability built in. And people on our networks, we have a couple of places where people hang out. They hang out on MeWe, and they hang out on Telegram, and the Facebook group is not as active as it used to be, but it's starting to get more active. So whichever of those platforms you like to interact on, that's what you do. By the end of the day, usually somebody circles back, especially if you've done it a few times, and says, I see that Margot's in the comments here. Margot, did you get the siding on your garage like you said you were going to? And then Margot explains if she did or didn't. So that accountability built in works really well. And the reason I had to start doing my 3 things, I process information different than most people. I think if I had been evaluated, if my mom had allowed me to be evaluated in school growing up when they wanted to evaluate me, I would have been diagnosed with, you guessed it, probably ADD or ADHD, and possibly slightly on the autism spectrum. Don't know, but suspect based on how I process information. And when there's a lot going on, I get super overwhelmed and can't function at all. And that's normal for a lot of people, actually. That's probably normal. And I can't see my way clear, except for I can, because I have this method now. And so it works for me. And when I started explaining it to different people who have different ways of processing information than I do, and they started doing it even without the strategic plan, it started making their life better, because every time they got to that point in the day where, like, you got up, your plan was to do a podcast, to go to choir, and go to the dentist. That's my plan today. And you realize that in order to do that, you had to be out the door at a certain time, and everything has to be done for that. Plus, the rest of the week, there's some stuff happening, so you should probably schedule that stuff. So let's see, it's 12:45. How am I doing? Well, the podcast isn't done yet because I'm still recording it right now, and I gotta go. Well, I don't have to go right now, but you know what I mean? Like, and in between there, like, the sheep got out, and the mailman came and talked too long, and I don't know what. Like, stuff happens sometimes. And you're sitting there at 12:45 going, oh, what was I supposed to do today? And you look, and your list is 20 things long, but you have 3. And you're almost done with one of those 3, and you only have 2 things left, and you can do it. That's what it's for. It's so that when you get to that state, you can look at it. And the other thing is that you don't constantly feel emotionally beaten down because you're not getting your to-do list done, because I don't know a to-do list in the history of to-do lists that actually gets done in the day it's written, unless the person is just unambitious. So it's to help you get real and to have some success, and to use that success to take one step forward every day. So that is how we go from vision to purpose to SWOT analysis to big, hairy, audacious goals, or areas of focus, as I like to call them, to SMART goals, to my 3 things, to start getting things done one at a time. And I hope this podcast helps you do your next step. If you like the work we do here and want to support the show, you can support it in 2 ways. 1, get your coffee at hollowroast.com. 2, consider becoming a member. Just head on over to livingfreeintennessee.com to find out more about that. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week. Okay, I only have one question that I see from today, and that's good because I really do need to go to the dentist, and I really do want to get the podcast produced before I leave. For single moms, should we have a personal vision and a family vision statement? Let's start with your family vision and think about if you need a personal vision or if it's different, because it may end up being the same. But sometimes you do. I do have a personal one that's different from the Holler Homestead one, because I had to teach myself to remember to enjoy the world I'm creating around myself, because I'm really good at working hard. I'm a little too good at working hard. So I have some things personally I work on. So I have 2. Not everybody needs to, and you may find that is your world. But on the other hand, your family one may fit, and it may fit for the long term. I know Amy Dingman kind of did this with her kids without using this method when they were in homeschool. Like, they set a whole family goal thing that I thought was pretty cool. She talked about that once. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to sign off now, and we will be back tomorrow at 12:30 with the big old round robin with John Willis. See you then.